Started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us at Secular AZ today. And again, put your name in the chat if you are so moved. Secular AZ is a nonprofit organization focused on protecting the Constitution and the separation of church and state for over a decade. We have incredible programming, including our Friday updates from all kinds of amazing speakers. We have historians, authors, elected officials, journalists, etc. Next Friday, we're going to be speaking with Dr. Carolyn Modis, and her topic is how the evangelical family structure facilitates abuse, a la the Dugars. And we'll continue our series about abuse happening in some religious organizations with some incredible speakers over the coming weeks. So I hope that you'll all support the work that we do at secularaz.org. Perhaps consider becoming a recurring donor to support our work at the legislature, at school boards, with our action alerts, etc. And if you do want to get more involved, we have a volunteer form, and we can tell you what kind of help we might need in our committees. So Lindsay will drop that in the chat too. But today, we are kicking off our series about religious trauma, abuse, and cults with none other than Jeff Sharlet. Jeff is a contributing editor for Vanity Fair and best-selling author, editor of 7 books, including The Family, which was adapted into a Netflix documentary series. He's the winner of the National Magazine Award for Reporting, the Molly Ivins Prize, and the Outspoken Award, among other honors. He is the Frederick Sessions Beebe under 35, I think that's under 35, professor in the art of writing at Dartmouth College.
Oh, no, I'm not under 35, just a year of 1935. I'm well over 35.
Okay. Okay. I thought maybe it was an older award or something like that.
No, they named it's an endowed chair. Interesting fact, named for, families give money to colleges to endow a chair. Frederick Beebe, I didn't know. They gave me the chair. Who is this guy? I felt bad. Now I know he was on the business side, not the publisher, obviously, but on the business side of the Washington Post during Watergate. He was, in fact, if you've seen the movie, you've seen an actor playing him. So he was a journalistic hero of his time.
Gotcha. And so you are then a teacher, a professor at Dartmouth College, right? And you live in Vermont. Is Bernie Sanders your neighbor?
No, but it's a small state. So, you can run into him. Better Bernie than, Kirsten Sinema. So,
True. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to you, and I'll get the questions as they come in, and I'll share those. So take it away.
Great. Thank you. Well, thanks, folks, for being with me. As I told Jean, I don't do slideshows, and I know people like them, but I don't. So I just like to talk. I like to talk to folks. It's a little bit what I do as a journalist, as a writer, going out trying to understand threats to democracy, the right-wing movements that have been growing for the 20 years that I've been covering right-wing movements in the United States, really starting with that group that Jean mentioned, The Family, which is the oldest and arguably most influential Christian conservative organization in the United States, going all the way back to 1935, when they were founded with the idea that the New Deal was a kind of a satanic plot. And so they roped in a lot of big businessmen and ultimately military leaders, and over time have evolved until they run something called the National Prayer Breakfast, which this crowd, I know I don't need to understand why a national prayer breakfast through the United States government is a violation of the First Amendment. But it's a violation of more than that, because of course it's been used as a lobbying festival for decades. And I wrote about that in The Family, and I wrote too about how that movement internationalized and how they supported strongmen, dictators overseas, based on their model of Christ. I would sit there in counseling sessions with the longtime leader and a congressman. He said, the way to understand Jesus, he says, look at Hitler. And they're not, don't wait, now hold on, they're not Nazis. He'd say, look at Stalin, look at Mao, Pol Pot. The common denominator was strength. Who is Christ to them? The iron fist. And they supported that overseas. And as members of Congress were able to, and in one case, Mike Pence, a vice president, were able to make that support material with guns for Suharto in Indonesia, and Saad Barre in Somalia, Marcos in the Philippines, men who destroyed their countries. I understood that model. So in 2015, when Trump rides down his golden escalator, I can see what's coming. This is the strong man come home, because this organization, and Christian nationalism in the United States has, for all its pushing at the establishment until Trump, it still stayed within a kind of establishment frame. So much so that, in fact, in my book, The Family, I wrote a chapter called The F Word. The F word is fascism. And I said, fascism, the real ideological construct that we learn from scholars, Robert O. Paxton and Jason Stanley and folks like that, that I don't think can happen in the United States. Now, there's more than one kind of bad under the sun. That can happen locally, too. Certainly, there's governors who at time have ruled with that sensibility. But getting in the way of it was fundamentalism. They wouldn't switch out the Fuhrer for the Father, right? They wouldn't switch out Jesus for an actual personality cult until Trump. And that was the move. And I could talk more about that in the questions, how right-wing evangelicals made that move and how the seeds for it were planted long before that. But what it allowed me to do in 2015 is to see, oh, okay, Trump is bringing down that elevator, a fascist aesthetic of thinking about fascism. The question was, would he find the full reception? The answer we know now from the years since is yes, he did find a full reception. So we have the F word, and I think historically understood fascism. In my new book, The Undertow, Scenes from a Slow Civil War, no slides, I'll just hold it up, there it is. A church, you can look closer, there's a church in Jackpot, Nevada, and this knife here, this knife on the cover says next to it 1/06/2021. It's an evidence photo. It's Ashley Babbitt's knife. Ashley Babbitt, the 35-year-old white woman, Air Force veteran, leading a charge of the mob, an insurrectionist charge. There it is, through a broken window in the Capitol and was shot dead, and has since become a martyr of the movement. And until recently, Tucker Carlson could be heard once a week declaring her unarmed. She was not unarmed. That was a knife. I hear some right-wingers say, well, it's a small knife. Try and take it onto an airplane and tell me how small that knife is. She was armed and she was killed, an insurrectionist. So my book goes in some ways, it covers the last 10 years, but it sort of begins in my mind with that 2015 moment of Trump coming down the golden escalator. And then as I travel through the Trumpocene, or the age of Trump, as I call it, the age of Trump, by the way, is not over even if Trump is gone. Trump changes the vernacular of American politics, the language in which we practice our politics, just as Reagan did in 1980, into the present moment, to January 6th and up to now, traveling around, talking to everyday people. I've done the kind of reporting where we go and we talk to the powerful, but I think now to understand the right-wing threat, we need to see how it is received. We need to understand the stories people tell themselves in order to live. Some of you might recognize that line comes from a great writer, Joan Didion, in a wonderful book, The White Album begins, the famous first sentence, we tell ourselves stories in order to live. And sometimes that line is mistaken as it's a beautiful line. Isn't that great? We live in the never-ending story. It depends on the story, right? So, so that's the book I set out to make with The Undertow. And I want to start by talking a little bit. I want to share with you the first sentence and the last, and then you'll have it, the first sentence and the last, and you'll be done. You can just move on because you'll understand the whole story. The first sentence is, throat clearing such as this prelude usually accounts for a journey that ends with the book in your hands. But this book is written from the middle of something, a season of coming apart. This is where we are. This is our condition. I call the prelude our condition, and I reject that language of crisis, the crisis of democracy, the crisis of climate. Crisis is kind of a religious language. It's a theological language. It's the final battle that Trump is telling us that we're in now. Now, this is our condition. We live in this. This is part of the long story that we have to figure our way through. The last line of the book, we start with the middle of something, a season of coming apart. The last line is, it was possible for a while not to be scared even. Oh, so there's good news. The book ends with some hope. It ends with some hope and begins with some hope, because this book about the Trumpocene, I begin with a kind of a guide through the darkness of our times. And it just so happens to be the great Harry Belafonte, who you probably know, just died the other day at age 96. I began with Mr. B, as he was known, partly because he's such an integral part of the long struggle. I got to spend some time with him, first talking about the music and then talking about the politics and finally talking about the vision of this heroic man, central to the civil rights movement. Not a lot of people know that. In the struggle all his days, his great song, Deo, the Banana Boat song, it's a fun song, it's a silly song, it's also a freedom song. He understood that. He told me a story once, Freedom Summer 1964. Freedom Summer 1964, and they were on 2-week shifts. The activists had gone down to Mississippi to register voters to vote, and then three young activists, Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney, 3 young activists were found killed, mutilated, and murdered, one of them buried alive by the Klan. And the movement, Freedom Summer, says, all right, change of plans. We're not going on 2-week shifts anymore. Every single one of us is going to stay down here. We need money. And they turned, as they always had, to Harry Belafonte, who used his massive star power to fundraise and put in his own money. But you couldn't wire cash down to Mississippi. A black man wires cash to Mississippi in 1964 for an activist. It's a death warrant, has to be delivered in cash. So he and Sidney Poitier, he goes and he says to Sidney, his old friend, he says, maybe the Klan will be more cautious about killing 2 big stars. The Klan was not. They fly down a little Cessna, Greenwood, Mississippi. They get out of the plane and the Klan is there. And it becomes a car chase with the Klan ramming their car, smashing into it. Finally, they make it to Greenwood, where hundreds of activists are waiting for them. And the Klan backs off. And Mr. B starts to sing. And now I will spare you my singing, but everyone knows that song, Deo, 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 like come and me want to go home, right? He changes the words, freedom come, and it won't be long. It won't be long, but we got to define long, because Mr. B just died decades after that, and it's still not here. And in fact, we face, I think, a scarier moment now than we have. There's been other seasons of political violence in the United States. We have to remember that. But we've never had a moment such as this, particularly for the Christian right, which I've spent so much of my life studying. Certainly, it is a more militant moment than any time in my years of reporting. But also because I've written historically, I don't think we can find something quite comparable to this. I began the biggest piece of reporting in this book on January 6, 2021, watching like so many of us. And I saw Ashley Babbitt, this young white woman, killed. And there was numerous videographers. You may have seen one on TV. That it turns out there's a lot of people videoing it. And we see only the hands of the officer who killed her, Lieutenant Michael Byrd. And he happens to be a black man. And because I'm a student of American mythology, a student of American history, because I'm an American, I know what's going to happen with this story. A black man kills a white woman. Happens almost instantly. The crowd starts, she's dead, but they start aging her backwards. She's 35, maybe 125 pounds, but they need her smaller, younger, more innocent. They say, oh, she's 115 pounds. She's in her 20s. No, she's 16, 110 pounds. She was just a little white girl. A little white girl. This is the old American story. This is the lynching story. At the root of lynching throughout American history is the idea of white womanhood under threat, under sexual threat, under violent threat from black men. And sure enough, that myth starts circulating very quickly. I realized that Trumpism had taken a theological turn. We'd entered into an age of martyrs, of martyrdom. Now, some people say, Ashley Babbitt's not a martyr, she's a terrorist. Well, we don't get to decide who the martyrs of other movements are. A martyr is a witness who dies for the cause. Nothing in the definition that requires the cause to be a good or honest or true one. She is a martyr to Trumpism, as Horst Wessel was a martyr to Nazism. very soon we start seeing these proliferating images of Ashley Babbitt with wings, of Ashley Babbitt with a sword. There's Ashley Babbitt t-shirts, justice for Ashley, unarmed, innocent Ashley. So I decided to follow that martyr myth across the country, to watch it in formation. And the biggest story I tell in this book, which is trying to sort of wrestle with the changing landscape of the religious right, to look at how it's adapting to this Trumpist moment. The biggest story is following what I call the undertow of the title. I don't know, Arizona, you're landlocked, but you maybe get to the beach sometimes, and you know that riptide that can pull you out to sea, and sometimes you don't even realize it's happening until suddenly you're out there. This is how I think we can understand the forces of fascism that have been drawing us to this moment for a while, that suddenly, so that one day people wake up and Roe is gone. And it was amazing to me, reporting on this for a long time. There was people saying, how did this happen? How did this happen? They started organizing 50 years ago, and they worked like hell at it. And we weren't paying attention. We see in Arizona, I sometimes hear friends, I'm far from Arizona, we hear something about your Wendy Rogers, and we say, how did someone like that get in power? She is only the latest in a long line, not just in Arizona, but all over this country. Even here in deep blue Vermont, where we have Bernie, I can go in any direction, 5 miles, and I can find a Confederate flag. I can find a flag of Trump as Rambo. I can find the scariest flag of all that I write about in this book. It's the all black flag. It's an American flag, just in shades of black, not the Blue Lives Matter flag, all black. And what it means, or what they believe it means, they think it's from the Civil War. They're wrong. It's a flag of no mercy, no justice. No prisoners. And in the coming Civil War that they believe and want to happen, there will be no prisoners. You can't surrender. You kill them all. It is also, in the religious mind of so much of the right, a kind of Jericho flag. Here I'm referring to the book of Joshua from the Bible, right? Everyone knows you march around Jericho 7 times. Everyone sort of knows that story, regardless of what your religious background. You have to look at scripture to find out. And then God tells Joshua to kill every man, woman, and child in Jericho. It's a genocide story. It's a genocide flag. And it's one that is reverberating throughout the country. I went out to Sacramento, California, to start my Ashley Babbitt mythological martyr myth journey, to a rally for Ashley Babbitt with her mother. Turned into a brawl between the Proud Boys and Antifa. Someone at the brawl says, why don't you come up to my church and you'll see why Ashley Babbitt really died. So I went up to a church in Yuba City, California, that has become notable on the national far right scene for never closing during COVID. And there was even a little viral video in which they presented a customized AR-15 to General Mike Flynn, QAnon patriot, Trump's first national security advisor. And he joked about he was going to use it to go hunting in Washington, right? Less noticed in the video was the customized AR-15 the church presented to its pastor, who I got to spend some time with, Pastor Dave Bryan, inscribed with, from the book of Joshua, chapter 1, verse 9. What more and more right-wing evangelicals are calling a battle verse. In fact, at the rally for Ashley Babbitt, the pastor was wearing a t-shirt that says Joshua 1:9. I went to Congresswoman Lauren Boebert. I'm guessing this crowd knows who she is, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert in Colorado. I went to her restaurant, Shooters, which is like, it's gross. It's like Hooters with guns. It's like they looked at Hooters and they said, how could we make this just even more offensive? I know, we'll add guns to everybody's hips. The merch there, the shirts, all bore Joshua 1:9, the battle verse, the genocide verse, I'd argue. But I started at that Yuba City church in California. And the first thing I noticed coming into this church, and I've been reporting on churches for a long time, there's no crosses. Well, I've seen that before. But as Pastor Dave Bryan explained to me, he says, now it's a time for a war faith. The cross, that's weak tea. That's sissy. The pulpit is made of swords. It is time for war. And they feel like they're almost already winning the war. I learned at this church, Hillary Clinton has already been executed. What, you've seen her since? Green screens, modern trickery, high tech, big tech trickery, right? The folks in the pews, nice suburban folks, college kids, I would ask them, I'd say, do you really believe that? And they'd say, well, it's interesting, gives you something to think about. What they liked thinking about were the executions to come, the ropes, the people that would dangle. They have passed the moment of believing that civil war might come and embraced a moment in which they believe it is here. I kept going from there, traveling not according to any particular plan, but just talking to the folks I met. Some of the people I met would say, or some of the people since said, why did you talk to all these right wingers? All these people who believe that they dreamed of Ashley Babbitt or they saw Ashley Babbitt. How did you meet so many January 6ers? Because they were there, because they were there. And I write from, and I think probably Arizonans understand this. My New York friends don't always understand it, that these folks are not the fringe, right? To be, when I look at Tucker Carlson off the air now, but I met one woman who was explaining to me how the horrible, horrible Las Vegas shooting was actually a conspiracy to kill Donald Trump, who wasn't there. This is the shooting at the country music concert. Well, what is the evidence? Well, it was an Islamist queer plot. Two groups that we know love to work together. What was the evidence? There was a man on the same floor as the shooter who had been seen eating Turkish kebab. And you're just laughing. This is ridiculous. In fact, when I interviewed her, I said, I can't use this. This is too crazy. And then I thought, well, I'll Google it. And sure enough, there it was on Tucker Carlson, being shared by a US congressman, a former brigadier general, working from papers brought up by several former Trump officials. And if I say that's fringe, I have to remind myself, I write for Vanity Fair magazine. I teach at Dartmouth College. I'm fringe. Tucker Carlson, he's down and out right now, but Fox News has an audience vaster than anything I can ever reach. That's a mainstream. So when I went looking for these folks, or just looking for who was out there, they were easy to find. What I was startled at that first church with the swords is not only did they have swords, they had a militia. And this was something new to me. I had seen in the past what arguably would be little fringe churches where guns were a significant part of it. Here was a sort of a suburbanish mini mega, not full, 20,000, but it's a big church. And Tuesday nights were militia recruitment night. And I started finding more and more of that, more guns than I've seen in 20 years of reporting. I'm not alarmed by guns. I'm a gun owner myself, as most of Vermont. People don't know that about us. It's a rural state, people have guns. But I saw more guns than I'd ever seen. Shooter's Grill, Lauren Boebert's restaurant, the manager comes over after a little while with his hand, well, you can't see me, his hand sort of hovering over his sidearm, like he's a gunfighter in the Old West, tells me it's time for me to leave. And I come to a church in Omaha, Nebraska, and I thought I would read you a little passage from this. This will give you a little bit of the flavor of what's happening, how the churches are changing. And I've been out there long enough reporting on this that I think, I hope you'll trust me when I say that this is something new. Sunday morning, on the brink of a plain of cracked and broken blacktop, parched almost to whiteness, the husks of a former strip mall, pizza machine offering bumper cars and thrill rides. In what was once perhaps a JCPenney, a church, West Omaha Baptist, and what was once perhaps a Sears, another church, Heartland Hope. And in between what was once perhaps a Best Buy, or at least has since been reconstructed to look like a brand new Best Buy, Lord of Hosts, the church I'm attending. A strip mall, everything made into not a storefront church, but a mega church, a consolidation of mega churches. Pastor Hank Kuhneman presiding, maybe the most militant of self-declared prophets on the national scene, who does not deny COVID-19, but celebrates it, who declares this virus is the Spirit of God, who channels messages from Christ that Trump will return. When? Soon. He's coming, saith the Lord. It might be Trump the man or Trump the idea in another man's skin. because prophecy never errs, but its truth takes many forms. This too, I say to my liberal friends in the bubble places, the cities that I love. They say, well, Trump's down and out, and look at DeSantis's polling. The movement that has happened is Trumpism. Trump is the current avatar. I doubt he will be the last. That is what we have to contend with. That's what people in the long struggle like Harry Belafonte have to contend with. Sanctuary is full for the day's second service, believers standing or shaking or dancing, a crowd of singers and players on stage, and a double bubble of glass for 2 drummers. There's a good old boy on bass, a black man with a mohawk singing, a cast of white witches a la Stevie Nicks as backup singers. The worship band strips it down to a slow, thick beat. A black man behind a bright red keyboard takes over vocals. I speak of race in this book, which is a central concern of this book, white supremacy as the electric current of fascism and Christian nationalism. I speak of it and I call it out because one of the things that we have to recognize is that presence of white supremacy, and also the way that it has a gravitational pull. What my friend Anthea Butler, Professor Anthea Butler at Penn University, in her great book, White Evangelical Racism, calls the promise of whiteness. How do you get people of color to embrace a white supremacist movement with this idea of a promise of whiteness, that the privilege will somehow be extended to you? So this church I'm describing is about a third non-white, even though it is a very white supremacist church. So the singers, they're singing this song, and what's remarkable to me about it is that the music is good. That's the other thing I want to tell people. We can't reassure ourselves, well, look at this, just a bunch of old tacky Fox watchers and so on, as if those people aren't citizens too, if they have votes too. But this is a young church. The music it's great. I've been to a lot of churches. This is good. This is good music. And then comes Pastor Hank, crouch walking onto the stage like a tiger, an older white man, well tanned beneath dark chestnut hair, so perfect it looks snap-on. He's wailing on air guitar. Come on, he shouts, come on. Eyes closed, doubled over, thin belt, dark shirt, pocket square, cufflinks shining. The screen behind him, a cosmic swirl. This is the part of the service when he prophesies, a verb, rocking back and forth, holding the mic like a joint. Inhale. A woman near me screams, Papa, I love you, Papa. She means God or Hank. She collapses into the arms of the ponytailed man beside her, her body convulsing. A release in the spirit realm. Pastor Hank murmurs over a simmer of synth and drum, his voice deep and comic, earnest because you hear that he doesn't need to be, that mockery is within his range. So too, evidently, is the voice of God himself, speaking now in the first person through his vessel, Hank, suddenly booming. Therefore, pay attention as they fill your sky. He means the fighter jets of the coming civil war that he so looks forward to. Pause, eyes closed, fingers up like antenna, receiving great warfare, he calls. In other prophecies, Pastor Hank has said that sometimes Jesus reveals himself to Hank in combat fatigues and a trim white t-shirt. Once, he says, the roof of the sanctuary lifted clear off, and a warrior in Indian headdress, the tallest feathers that I ever saw, hurled a flaming spear at Hank's feet and told him, now take this nation. The warrior Christ, an old tradition surging again now in America. A native Christ, an indigenous Christ, in Hank's vision, passing his torch to a white man. Drought. Great heat will be upon the land, Pastor Hank cries. Yes, Lord, says the man beside me, as if grateful for this renaming of the sizzle outside as not climate crisis, but confirmation of the divine. That's how prophecy works. More diagnosis than prognosis, more description than soothsaying. It can be a means of deception or perception, or both at the same time. So they go on, and the service, there's one point of common ground, and it's sort of funny, is Pastor Hank, he's just railing against all the normal things, the mask mandators and the vaccine genociders and all the many, many pedophiles. And then, but he then says, as a special venom for those who would read scripture on Kindle or some other wicked app. He is a man who loves books. binding and glue. And he says, you got to have the real Bible. Why? Because of course, big tech is going in and switching the words of the Bible, making it, pulling away the sort of the justifications for white authority, for patriarchal authority, making it queer friendly. And at one point, I informed them I was going. He starts preaching against me, shaking his Bible like he's going to throw it like an axe at me, talking about journalists. And what was fascinating to me about this moment is I've been doing this for so long, and people think, well, how do you go into these spaces? Well, it's pretty easy. You knock on the door. The reality is, for all that time, and I don't misrepresent myself, folks always think either they're going to convert you. It's no accident God brought you here. Or they think, well, I know that you're godless, but it doesn't matter. My words God will use you to spread my word. This is the first time that's not happening. It happened at Shooter's Grill, where the manager comes and says, no, just get out with his gun. It happened with the Proud Boys in Sacramento, where they swarmed around me. But for one man, I would have been in a bad spot. And it happened here in Omaha. Pastor Hank preached against me. He then turned it around and started talking about why people don't understand the need for guns. And how does he explain this? Through Psalm 23. Psalm 23. And even if you're a secular person, an atheist, you may know that one. You've heard it at funerals and maybe at weddings too. For all I know, you've heard it on TV shows. Yea, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death. It's a very gentle one, right? Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. He's pointing around to the back of the church where there are armed men ringing the church. And he says this in the most grotesque way, thy rod, and he thrusts his hips. It's so gross. He wants it to be a phallic metaphor. Thy rod, he says, is thy gun. The church is armed. After that, I tried to talk to some folks, but some of the militia guys came and they were in full tactical gear. You would have thought they were riot cops, but they were uniformed. Again, a lot of I'm a lefty liberal myself, but a lot of my friends like to imagine, oh, these militia guys, it's just a bunch of out of shape guys. Not these guys. These guys were armed and fit and scary, and they came and said, you got to leave. So I left, and I'm talking to some folks in the parking lot. Public property didn't matter. They send out an usher with a gunman. And I said, I brought a pencil and you brought a gun. And we starting to go back and forth until finally the church usher himself leans forward and he says, how do you know I don't have a gun? This to me now is an American question. How do you know I don't have a gun? What am I carrying? Ashley Babbitt, just a small white woman crawling through a window, or Ashley Babbitt, trained by the Capitol Guardians, the branch of the National Guard, which was tasked with protecting the Capitol, breaking through a window, bringing with her a knife, there to be the storm, declaring God wins, and God wins when it takes over the Capitol. They didn't win on January 6th. And I have to say, my belief is they won't win, but not if we think in the passive voice, not if we think passively. If we speak of as democracy as something you have, then you don't have it. It's something you do. If you talk about preserving democracy, well, now you're talking about a jam jar. You're talking about putting up on a shelf. Democracy is something you have to get up and do, and it's only as good as it lasts for one day. I want to just close this presentation. Maybe we can talk some questions. One last paragraph. I said it begins with Harry Belafonte. It ends with that sentence, for a while it's possible not to be scared even. That's another singer, even more forgotten, Lee Hayes. You know his songs, If I Had a Hammer, On Top of Old Smoky, Kisses Sweeter Than Wine, Goodnight Irene. These are the songs he brought to the American Songbook. He was broken by the House Un-American Affairs Committee back in the 50s and 60s. He was defeated, but he would always remember that moment when, through singing together with the radical singers, and by radical, I'm not talking politics, I'm talking about freedom dreams. It was wild it was for a while it's possible not to be scared even. I think something Harry said to me, Mr. Belafonte, and he also suffered a lot of defeats. Martin Luther King, his dear friend, still spoke to him in the present tense to the end of his days. He hated the Hollywoodization of the civil rights movement. He says, hey, we didn't win. Look at this world, right? He talked about the way after every great march, there would be a killing. He said, they're going to let you know you didn't win, Belafonte says. That's why he's been so angry so long. It's what keeps him alive, or 96, it kept him alive for a long time. Where your anger comes from, he says, is less important than what you do with it. What do you do with it? What he's always done. You take it from the top. You sing your song again until they hear it like it's the first time. You make it your own, and then you give it away. So inspired by Mr. B, that's what I try to do with this book. I wish I could give it away. I'd send you all free copies, but the publisher won't let me do that. But you share the story. We get together and we talk. That's how we do democracy. So with that, I'll end, and let's have some democracy and hear from somebody else.
I would love to take one of your classes, that's for sure. I could listen to you talk about this all day. There's a couple of comments first. Rosemary says, hey, Jeff, thanks so much for all the hard work you have done over many years about the issues of Christian nationalism. I followed and read your books that were incredible and enlightening. I will be reading your new book. Ian from Mesa says his favorite food is salmon risotto. Color is orange. Wait, there weren't questions. Let's see. There's another comment here. Let's see. Donna says, for 50 years, pro-choice feminists were told to shut up and stop being shrill, hysterical harridans by people supposedly on our side. Right up until the Dobbs leak, we were being exhorted to find compromise and agree to sensible restrictions. Also, it was identity politics and a distraction to certain people in 2016, and it does make me think, that comment makes me think about the kind of schism too that's happened with some people in Planned Parenthood, because they saw the writing on the wall long ago. And that is why, a lot of at the state level, I believe, maybe even at the national level, said we can't endorse candidates who are taking police union money. And people were like, you're crazy. What are you doing? And they said, you'll see when they start arresting, doctors and patients and anybody who drives somebody across state lines. So they were spot on the whole time. And then let's see. It's funny to me how much truth can be at the center of some of their fears. I have personal testimony of churches intentionally publishing modernized versions of the Bible to perpetuate small interests of church-specific ideologies, like Mary being a virgin instead of just a young girl. So yeah, the Bible gets changed to conform to special interests, but lots of churches do that in their favor. And then somebody else is saying, fantastic lecture, and they have goosebumps. So great. All right, now to the questions, unless you'd like to comment on any of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like risotto too.
Rosemary says, how do you see the intersection of QAnon with the Christian nationalist movement? I heard an author on NPR talking about how QAnon has been quiet, but they are prepping for the 2024 election.
I mean, QAnon is also mutating pretty rapidly. I don't see it as a convergence. I see it as it is part of the same thing. What was happening sort of and began before 2016 was a kind of ends justify the means theology, which we can sort of see in a practical way the Christian right always embracing. But to get to that strongman cult, to get to the so-called, the thrice married, scandalous Donald Trump, or as one Christian right leader described him in a best-selling book, God's chaos candidate. The idea wasn't that he was a good man in the same way that King David wasn't a good man, right? The idea that he was chosen by God as a tool, in that book described as a wrecking ball. And so once you get to that, you can start just sort of throwing away a lot of sort of scriptural impediments. I think the tendency is to say, isn't that hypocrisy? Okay, but that's beside the point. It does nothing to slow it down. QAnon is lived religion. QAnon is a deeply Christian school of thought, even as it's drawn in some others. But the whole idea of God wins, a final battle, and particularly, I would argue, and its adoption among a small core, knowingly, but most not knowingly, of a very old Christian practice of anti-Semitism, which is the blood libel, right? The idea, this used to justify pogroms, was the idea that Jews were secretly eating the blood of Christian babies. Well, now we have Soros backing Hillary Clinton, stealing the blood of innocent babies, right? It's the same old story. I think QAnon is really important. And as I would travel around, I went to lots and lots of Trump rallies, and we'll keep doing so. You know, what was interesting to me is how many more people have absorbed QAnon, even if they've never heard of QAnon. And I think that's why a little bit we can do ourselves a disservice of a focus on, you know, the ideologues of QAnon, because there's lots of people who would disavow that, some of that. They'd say JFK Jr. is not alive. That's ridiculous. But, oh, yeah, no, I think, well, I mean, all over the country, we see mainstream Republicans talking about Democrats as groomers, right? That's QAnon. They may not know that's QAnon, but so that's there. And I think that's also sort of displaced, the focus on groomers has actually sort of slotted really neatly into evangelicalism's focus on the unborn, of an innocent, the protection of which justifies all kinds of actions, increasingly, as it has historically for, you know, the army of God and anti-choice violent terrorists such as that. Now it justifies for the men with AR-15s who line up outside of hospitals and schools and libraries every weekend now. That's happening. This is why I call it a slow civil war, as it is for the folks. I live in Vermont, and we have a school district goes over to New Hampshire. Our school district is being challenged by folks who want a list of all the queer kids and all the trans kids, and they're worried about grooming going on in the schools. Those folks, by the way, aren't Christians. But when we speak of Christian nationalism, we need to understand that we're talking about something bigger than who goes to church. Very few of the folks I meet in my travels for this book or at Trump rallies, except for those at churches, are churchgoers. Ashley Babbitt wasn't a churchgoer, but she understood herself as invading the Capitol for Jesus. So church membership is not our distinction. Ashley Babbitt was sort of a QAnon follower. She used the slogans. She wasn't doing numerology, as some of them are. I think we want to look, I think the question is great because it gets at, like, how do these things kind of inform each other and exponentially enlarge beyond strict definitions.
There's quite a few questions coming in now. Rosemary is asking, I followed you on Twitter through your time through Wisconsin. What made you choose Wisconsin?
I'll speak openly about that, which is I have a queer non-binary child who, like many young people today, struggling with mental health, has a great program for OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. They were trying to get a handle on that. So we went to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin, the so-called battleground state, we might want to rethink those metaphors as they become concrete. And I was there, and I would spend time with my kid, but they were mostly in their program. And I was there when Dobbs came down, when Roe fell. And as it happened that very morning, sort of an acquaintance, a friend who was going through the IVF process was literally meeting with her doctor in the clinic, was on the table, and the doctor comes in crying and says, we've just been advised by counsel, we can't go forward. Wisconsin immediately referred it to 1849 law, no abortion, no exceptions. And so I decided to do what I do, which is sort of just travel around. And it's real easy to figure out where to go because people are flying flags. And some of those flags are scary. And you say, well, why would you go near that? Because that person has advertised. They want you to know. So I tried to be careful, mostly stumbled in Marinette, Wisconsin. I stopped to take a photograph of a flag says, fuck Trudeau. I'm like, in Wisconsin? What's this about? I'm taking the picture and out comes the family. I had violated their security perimeters, actually two of them. They had all kinds. Comes dad, gun on his hip, and they invite me in. So at that point, I figure I better go in. Inside is an arsenal, an absolute arsenal. AR-15, stacks and stacks of ammo, body armor, sniper rifles. The gun he claims was used in Dirty Harry, but I did my research and he was wrong. It's a different gun, but it looks like it. And that guy talked, and I said, if I got a picture of Wisconsin that I don't think I would have if I had gone and sort of said, gone down the normal sort of electoral routes. These were not the folks who show up for that. I think Wisconsin is very much like Arizona in some ways, right? It's a state that is purple with a legislature that is wildly out of control. And that makes it such a dangerous, dangerous place, right? And in many ways, more dangerous than, say, Alabama, which is kind of neatly aligned. A lot of friction in Wisconsin, a lot of friction in Arizona.
Let's see, we have some more questions. Dawn is asking, what is our boy Ralph Reed up to these days? He pops up once in a while. Unfortunately, he's still alive.
I wish for no one's death, but if fate decrees otherwise. Ralph Reed's interesting. I don't follow Ralph Reed as much anymore. I will say that what was partly just because I spent so long writing about the elite Christian right, the structures of power in the Christian right. And, I did 2 books and a documentary series about that. And then I wanted to get into what scholars would sort of see as reception studies. How is this play out in the world? What are the stories that people are telling? So I don't pay as much attention to Ralph Reed. That said, I think one of the things that was overlooked back in 2016 was the very central role that religion played in Trump's campaign, in big part for Ralph Reed. Ralph Reed did a genius job of organizing. I mean, I think they knocked on more doors than had ever been knocked on for a campaign. To get that vote out for Trump. No one was paying it, or not no one, much of the press wasn't paying attention to it because the assumption was evangelicals won't vote for Trump. And you would see this at Trump rallies. I would always go, I never use a press pass. I want to experience, what is this like? So I wait in line for 6 hours and then I stand around in the concrete for another 4 hours. The press comes in late. They huddle in a little metal press pen where Trump puts them in the middle as a prop. They agree to be a prop in a kind of a wrestling kind of arena. There's always going to be a moment in the rally where Trump says, look at those scum, and the crowd all turns around and screams at them, right? But they would be there, early enough. And so the warm-up speakers at every Trump rally would be a preacher. And I've covered so many Christian right places. These were some of the most militant preachers I've heard. They were almost always men of color, Black or brown men for a mostly white crowd, absolving them in their mind of racism. See, I can't be racist because there's that guy up there and he's saying this kind of stuff. So I look back at the press and what are they going to do with this incredible stuff? On the phones, texting their friends, waiting for Trump, right? If they'd been paying attention to those, preachers, I think they would have been paying more attention to Ralph Reed. The little guys and the big guys tend to line up, and we would have seen more clearly the central role that religion was going to play in that campaign.
Okay, let's see. There's another one. This one comes from Lori. I'm going to save this one, actually, the one from Lori, because I think that'll be a good way for us to wrap up. There's another question, though, from Ron. What changes are you hoping that your book engenders in public perception or policy?
Policy, I don't know. I don't have any solutions. In fact, I'll tell you, here's the sort of the last lines of my introduction. Here's my policy. We will need new songs if we're to make it through what is to come, what is already here. I am not the one to write them. My hope is less than that. only that this book may reveal fault lines within our fears, in which others will find the better words our children may one day sing. And I think what I mean by that, there's a couple of things, practical things I'd like to take away. One is the right is not monolithic. And in fact, when we have a fascist movement, like any other social movement, it means it's a convergence of a lot of folks who normally don't talk to one another. I sometimes hear from lefties who say, the only thing I need to know about a Nazi is where his nose is, so I can, give it a punch, right? No, you need to know what branch he is, what sect he is. You need to know these fault lines because they can be exploited, they can be exacerbated, and that's what we want to do. We see, for instance, there's a reporter named Catherine Joyce, a good friend of mine, now was at Salon, now at In These Times, is really doing some of the best reporting on some of the intellectual movements of the right, the new traditionalists and the integralists. And you may have heard of neither of these movements, and you need to if you're going to understand how it's working. They used to have a big conference together. Now they're not talking to each other. That's good news, right? So one thing I want to see is that there are all these factions coming together, converging. That's what makes it scary. That's what makes it powerful. Like all social movements can come apart. Another thing I want people to see is fascism. It's a dream politics, right? And you're like, what? It's just ugly. It's a utopian politics. Utopia means nowhere. It is about making a world that doesn't exist. It's an imaginary politics, which is to say it is also driven by imagination. I think some of us, seculars, left, liberal, we think of imagination as necessarily a good thing. I would argue that certainly the Democratic Party is less powered overall right now by imagination than the fascist movement as a whole. And one of the ways I saw that, and I sort of write about this in the book, fascism is, of course, first and foremost an aesthetic and always has been since the Italian futurist movement gave rise to Mussolini, an art movement, is as you travel across the country. I'm traveling with my kid out to Wisconsin. I'm trying to tell them not to be afraid of the future, but we're just by the mile markers ticking by these fascist flags, one after the other. I started documenting them. I've got about 200 varieties of fascist flag. This is not to count all the handmade stuff, the billboards, homemade, silos painted, trees carved into totem poles. This is Americana folk art, fascist folk art. A friend of mine at the Smithsonian says we've got to collect it. It is a reflection of the moment. The good news, there's more rainbow flags. There's more rainbow flags. The bad news, they're concentrated in the towns and it's all the same damn flag. You buy it from Amazon for $14.99. I have one myself, right? Where are homemade billboards? Where is the great variety of imagination of expression? We need to rise to that. That's what I mean by the songs. That's what I mean by thinking. We have the arts, right? We do not have as much of it as we think we do. We have ceded more of it to a corporate world than we need to. I'm in the literary world. It's a bubble. The literary world is bubbled. I work in a bubble in that sense. So I think I want people to say, hey, look at this. That is a dark imagination. We need to build not just an organization, but a profound political imagination. So that is my hope.
I will say here in Phoenix, especially like Central Phoenix, there's some really beautiful street art, street artists and murals and things like that, and Black Lives Matter. So, you do see it, but again, this is not
more.
Yeah, it's not in the rural parts though. You're not going to
see
even
the suburban or the suburban parts too. That's the thing. Yeah, same. Look, mural art is great, and we need more of it, but on every front, more songs that like let us use our art to fight fascism.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a few more questions, and if you can stay, great, because it is 12:56. Kirk is asking, I've recently learned that some fundamentalist Christians believe in tracing their lineage back to the 12 tribes of Israel. What's up with that?
Could you repeat that for a moment? I'm sorry.
Sure. He's saying that he recently learned that some fundamentalist Christians believe in tracing their lineage back to the 12 tribes of Israel. What's up with that?
I mean, that's a fairly minor sect. The most notable sect in that variety are the Black Israelites, which is a very nasty group, um, very anti-Semitic, and historically occasionally violent, but they're also tiny. Um, there's other more interesting things, like the guys that I wrote about in the family, the fellowship, who, and this, this includes dozens of congressmen, and they have a house on C Street in Capitol Hill where congressmen are put up. They host a national prayer breakfast. The inner circle does believe that they are the actual heirs to the covenant with God. So much so that some of them who are not Jews have adopted some Jewish religious practices like the mikvah, the ritual cleansing bath. More interesting is that at Christian right churches all over the country, you won't find people who will say that they are, the 12 tribes of Israel. What you will find are shofars, which is the ritual ram's horn.
Yeah.
We saw there was lots of shofars at January 6th. Very few Jews, but lots of shofars. These people, it's a Jericho horn, right? It's here we're coming. It's a battle horn for them. And so I think more interesting is the appropriation of Jewishness. There's also fascinating to me, for a long time, the Christian rights appropriated Martin Luther King, tried to claim that were Martin Luther King alive today, he would be on their side. Incorrect. What's even more amazing now, and I have 3 instances in the book of Christian nationalists appropriating Malcolm X. If ever there was a guy who was really not in their corner, there's an online account for Ashley Babbitt. It has a picture of Malcolm X, that famous photo of Malcolm X sort of looking out the window with a gun. This is by any means necessary, justice for Ashley. They are taking, of course, the idea of themselves as a persecuted minority. They're a majority who feels that they are a persecuted minority, and then they want a legacy of violence which disregards the particular circumstances of Malcolm X, certainly disregards the particular circumstances of Jericho, and licenses violence in the present day.
Okay, Jill says she's got a lot of questions. The first question is, are you familiar with the group Christians Against Christian Nationalism? And are there more groups like this?
I'm not familiar with that group, but there's any number of fine churches that are against Christian nationalism. I like to tell a story in my book, C Street, and I ended up writing about something called the Kill the Gays Bill in Uganda. Uganda, which many people don't realize is kind of basically a satellite of the United States, that's in terms of its budget. And with the support of American Christian right activists, created a genocidal bill that would make the death penalty for homosexuality. And in 2009, 2010, and 11, I worked with some others against it. The key ally, the author of the bill, he later blamed me and Rachel Maddow, who he said are a gay couple, which starts to tell you his understanding of what homosexuality is, for destroying his bill. And Rachel played an essential part, but I would say even more essential was a man named Warren Throckmorton, self-described fundamentalist Christian, teaches at a Bible college, fascinating guy, was a guy who was once a leader in the so-called gay conversion therapy movement, right? Until he realized he was wrong. And he was a man of conscience, like, no, this is untrue. He is a guy who I think still believes that homosexuality is a sin, but there are so many sins above it. So he went to work, church by church by church, cutting off the financial sources for these genocidal activists in Uganda, and in a way that I couldn't have. I'd say that's a Christian against Christian nationalism. That's a Christian in the Roger Williams tradition, liberty of conscience. The Roger Williams of Rhode Island, who was a very devout man, but believed in absolute liberty of conscience. It's from him that we have our First Amendment, comes down through his ideas. So yeah, I don't know Christians against Christian nationalism, but everywhere there are progressive churches and even some conservative churches that are fighting the good fight.
So Jackie has a question. Do you have a Substack or any other kind of periodical that people can subscribe to?
I mean, I do have a Substack, but I haven't written anything on it. I write for Vanity Fair magazine, and I write books, and so I sort of it's the idea. Twitter, I write a lot on Twitter, and I've been trying to kind of actually really. We'll see if Twitter survives now. So who knows? Twitter and Instagram at Jeff Sharlet. That's where, maybe I'll get to that Substack one of these days. But I'm trying to meet my magazine deadlines, so to put more out there is tough.
Understood. Yeah. Well, and I think you kind of have answered this. I mean, it's really hard to sometimes on our Friday talks, we talk about really heavy things, and it's hard to be hopeful as we enter into the weekend and try to, just shed the existential disaster we're all going through. So what can you say to us that can give us some hope?
Well, I start with Harry Belafonte. I'll end with Harry Belafonte. And in the book, I wrote about. So I was asked to write about Harry Belafonte. And first, I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. Why would I want to do that? I don't do celebrity profiles. I'm a white guy. I grew up in a little small white working class town. We sing Deo in elementary school. We didn't know it was a freedom song, right? And then I started to discover this history. And so I started to go to the archive. Before I meet Harry, I want to really have a sense. And I go to this archive in New York where I found this hour of television that at the time you couldn't watch anywhere else. Tonight with Harry Belafonte, 1959. He's the biggest star in the country at that time. First man to sell 1 million records is not Elvis Presley. Same year, it's Harry Belafonte, black man. And it's sponsored by Revlon, and you're like, oh, a woman in a ball gown says, and now Mr. Belafonte. And then it comes on and he is pulling no punches. And he's got Odetta, he's got Sonny and Brownie, he's got he's got the dancers, these brilliant dancers, Norman Jewison, the great director, then down on his luck. And he brings them together you've never seen anything like this on television. And you wouldn't again after that, because although it was the biggest contract, the whole South blacked it out. We can't watch that. And they canceled the rest of the series. When I wrote that in that archive, that was the only place you could see it. I later went back and watched it with Mr. B. The good news is it's on YouTube. Go Google Tonight with Belafonte. Watch that. It will make your heart sing, and it will not be the cheap grace. It will not be that, hey, everything's going to be all right. It will be the struggle is long, but look at your comrades. Look at those who are fighting alongside you. Hear their voices. It'll just raise your heart. And I return to it again and again because it gives me strength. It's not even my music. Look, you might be saying, oh, I don't care for that kind of music. I mean, I'm much younger than that. I have a different kind of music. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. True music like that, true heart will go cut across genre.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to do that because at this point, since my job requires that I follow these, current events very closely, not just here, but throughout the United States, and even like what happened recently in Uganda and the Alliance Defending Freedom taking that on. Anyway, I watch a lot of Ted Lasso. I'll rewatch Schitt's Creek, things that just make me happy, right?
Yeah.
But that's good. I appreciate that. And I so appreciate you. I feel so lucky that you spoke to us today. And seriously, I could definitely sit in your classes and enjoy it very much, I'm sure.
Thanks very much, Jean. I really appreciate you having me here. Thanks very much.
Sure. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.